What happens when a power-hungry HOA enforcer targets my kids' joy? Get ready for a wild ride of laughter, rebellion, and a showdown that could change our neighborhood forever. To say that my Saturday turned chaotic the moment Karen Fletcher locked onto my kid's bike like a hawk spotting a mouse would be an understatement of epic proportions. I had just secured that flashy green ride, admiring the way it gleamed under the bright sun when Karen's presence invaded my little bubble of peace. Dressed in her power suit, the fabric hugging her like a shady cloud, she trotted across my driveway with the stealth of a tank. Next to her, her oversized purse dog, ironically named Sassy, seemed to share her authoritarian aura, dragging its paws in reluctant compliance. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the scent of imminent absurdity. I braced myself for the inevitable slew of complaints. "Alex," she chirped, the sickly sweetness dripping from her words like syrup, "that bike is really not in keeping with our community's, decorum." I blinked. Was she seriously comparing my children's joy, encapsulated in that neon green piece of happiness, to the actual aesthetics of suburban life? Was it too late to roll my eyes so far back that they entered the cosmos? "Don't you think it's a bit garish?" she asked, squinting as though the bike were a ghastly work of modern art she had stumbled upon in a museum gone rogue. I could feel my inner DIY warrior gearing up for battle, the frustrated sentiments bubbling upwards in my throat, fighting to escape as mere words. "Oh, you mean the bike that brings joy to my children and gets them outside instead of glued to screens? Yeah, I see why that could threaten the fabric of suburban society." I shot back, unable to resist the urge to douse her in some well-deserved sarcasm. Sassy yipped as if in solidarity, though I was pretty sure it was just confused by the rising levels of insanity in the conversation. Karen huffed in disapproval, her brow furrowing like a thundercloud, balancing perfectly between offense and righteous indignation. "You might want to check the HOA guidelines regarding attractiveness," she retaliated, pretending to whip out a rule book that was likely a defunct napkin from last month's potluck. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the escalating tension. It was Marcus, who must have felt the waves of fury radiating from my general vicinity. "Need a tech wizard? Let's take down the Dragon Lady." It read with enthusiasm, precisely the kind of response I needed. So there I was, battling a living nightmare this Saturday afternoon, and yet relief washed over me, knowing I had a secret weapon in my corner. After glancing back at Karen, who appeared to be contemplating the aesthetic integrity of the weeds in my garden, I crafted a hasty plan. I quickly typed back, "Tomorrow after church. Bring your gadgets. We're about to make some HO-hilarity." With newfound enthusiasm, I pivoted the conversation back to Karen. "Why don't we put it to a vote?" I suggested with a cheeky grin. "Let's get the neighbors involved. After all, they should have a say about whether our green bike is a punk rock anthem in a world full of elevator music." I nearly burst into laughter as I imagined the uproar it would cause among my neighbors. Half would probably back me just to witness the showdown. Not that they actually wanted to oust the bike, they just recognized the absurdity of Karen's reign. For once, she was stumped, her brain gears whirring as she desperately tried to respond to the unexpected challenge. But then I remembered Marcus's latest project, a theft deterrent device he had been tinkering with that worked wonders on any engine. A sly smile crept across my face as I realized that we could broaden the battlefield. If Karen dared to continue her campaign against childhood joy, perhaps some retribution was in order. I would have a gadget ready that would leave her struggling to escape her own driveway, her engine sputtering as if protesting the sheer tyranny of her HOA ideals. Payback, if you would. After a hectic evening filled with laughter, snacks, and tech tinkering, I was brimming with anticipation the next day. Marcus and I had pieced together a device that not only jammed her car engine but gave an innocent argument of malfunction. This was going to be too good. As we casually strolled into the neighborhood later that afternoon, my heart thudded with excitement. I could already envision Karen's face as she confessed to someone about the mystery of her suddenly defunct vehicle, while the kids rode their bikes nearby, blissful and unbothered. It was a bitter twist of fate that might just taste quite sweet. Would she really dare steal our joy a second time? The universe seemed ready to chime in. The next day arrived with the kind of promise found only in storybooks, bright and full of mischief, destined to put a smile on my face. The kids, blissfully oblivious, hopped on their bikes, their laughter ringing in harmony with the chirping birds. As they sped down the sidewalk like rocket-propelled lunatics, I couldn't help but feel a bit of vindication. This was the epitome of pure childhood, and I refused to let a power-hungry blonde tornado ruin it. With Marcus beside me, his earbuds firmly in place, as he fine-tuned the anti-theft device in his backpack, we set our plan into motion. Before leaving the house, I marveled at the awful, inexpensive lawn ornaments in my front yard, an ostentatious giraffe and flamingo duo that felt like rebel flags against HOA oppression. More decorum, Karen, I chuckled to myself. As we approached Karen's property, a part of me couldn't help but feel a flicker of mischief. Lo and behold, there she was, meticulously inspecting every blade of grass like she was evaluating the next contestant for a gardening award, or perhaps the next victim of her petty rule enforcement. Marcus could barely contain his snickers, keeping his laughter contained behind his teeth, while we crossed the invisible line that separated mild annoyance and outright theater. When I say go, we slip this bad boy under her car, I whispered, gesturing to the stealthy gadget we dubbed the Chaos Engine Invader. And pray it works like we planned. The thrill hung in the air, along with a whiff of impending revenge, enhancing the little sauce of absurdity I was reaching for. Go, I hissed, and we darted toward her car, a pulsing black SUV, narrowly avoiding the most common deaf-blinding properties of contemporary design. The world slowed down. The camera zoomed in on our faces, masked beneath the absurdity of casual rebellion. Marcus slid the device underneath in a smooth move reminiscent of wrestlers taking down an opponent. Just as we emerged back to safety, it happened. Karen spotted us like a hawk, warily watching a pack of raccoons approach her prized picnic spread. "What are you two up to over there?" she bellowed, eyes narrowed. Well, at least I could give her credit. Even when setting off alarms in my heart, that woman could make accusations sound like a title bout in a boxing ring. With no time to gather our coolness, we simply grinned and went with blatant honesty. "Just admiring your car, Karen. Looks like a mighty fortress." The flattery rolled off my tongue like syrup, and Marcus joined in with a half-hearted thumbs up, triggering a slow reveal of Karen's increasingly bigger question mark face. Her brows knitted like an elaborate tapestry of disbelief. But without missing a beat, she fluctuated from fuming confusion to outright ire, swinging her hands with the elegance of an overturned shopping cart. "You kids, always ruining the peace in this neighborhood," she raged, escalating into a lecture on noise pollution and suburban harmony. A standing ovation would have been welcome at that moment, as her speech continued with the fire of 100 HOA meetings combined. But lo and behold, the grand moment arrived. As Karen's voice crescendoed to its dramatic peak about keeping suburban standards, her SUV erupted into a cacophony of sputters and strange wheezing noises. Marcus and I exchanged panicked glances before bursting into laughter, tears now streaming down our faces. It felt like we were watching an epic slapstick comedy, with her vehicle coughing and stuttering as if declaring its rebellion against the HOA gentry. Every sputter sounded like a triumphant battle cry, reverberating the sweet notes of karmic grace. Karen's cherry-red face could have rivaled a fire truck as she marched toward her SUV, shaking her fists in total bewilderment at the sheer farce unfolding before her. The absurdity peaked when Karen stepped inside her vehicle, begging her complex machinery to cooperate. The engine whined in protest, making the sound of a deflated balloon, and I could no longer contain my mirth. "Let me guess. Your car doesn't abide by the rules either, huh?" I called out, allowing a triumphant cackle to escape as the final thread of genuine composure unraveled. "Looks like you need an HOA member approval just to get it back in shape." The flatness of my words hit her like a bag of potatoes tossed from a 10th-story window. The spectacle only deepened my delight. Miss Sassy Dog lay at her feet looking absolutely unimpressed, as if begging her to see the humor in all this madness. Finally, I approached the spectacle and leaned against her car, wiping away a phantom tear from laughter. Oh, Karen, don't worry. This anti-theft device is totally new. I bet if you take it to the HOA machine shop, they'll have it working again in no time. Unless, oh, wait, you'll need a special permit for that, huh? I paused for effect, savoring the moment. The neighbors began to gather, their heads poking out from behind their curtains, eager to witness the hilarity and perhaps back me up in this showdown of wills. The sweet notes of victory began to play in my head, and I reveled in the chaos we had created in our desperate quest for bicycle freedom. How long would it take Karen to accept that she had finally met her match in this suburban battle of wits? It was a war of joy and laughter versus oppression and rules, and I felt like the kid in the playground who finally stood up to the bully. Would this be the start of a thrilling new chapter in our neighborhood's tales? As I savored every second of Karen's engine's dramatic betrayal, the small gathering of neighbors began to murmur, their expressions shifting from curiosity to delight. It was as if we'd all been waiting for the show, and now here it was, an unplanned performance of suburban revenge, starring yours truly and the self-proclaimed queen of HOA bureaucracy. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and I could practically smell the scent of popcorn in the air, even though it was just a couple of kids munching snacks while spectating this conflict of epic proportions. Was this how spectacles began? One person's misfortune becoming the comedic fodder for the rest? Then, in what seemed like a twisted parallel to a Shakespearean tragedy, Karen emerged from the back seat, her face scrunched up like she was trying to solve the most complex riddle in history. Meanwhile, almost as if my inner poet was summoning a muse, I felt inspired to theatrically collapse onto the hood of her rebellious SUV. Sorry, Karen, is that one of those new HOA-approved car models? I'm still waiting for mine to get upgraded. I howled, peering over the windshield with an exaggerated expression of mock concern. If ever there was a moment designed for selfies, this was it. Yet everyone seemed too captivated by the unfolding drama to think about capturing the scene digitally. Perhaps they were too absorbed in their own gumption, excited by the prospect of an HOA villain getting her comeuppance right out in the open. Denial washed over Karen like a tidal wave as she frantically slapped buttons on her dashboard, each honk and whimper from the car punctuating the absurdity of her plight. This cannot be happening! My engine doesn't malfunction. I demand to know who did this, she shouted, her voice high-pitched and frantic, almost cartoonish, as it pierced through the chuckles of the crowd. I couldn't resist a grin. Her heavy-handed entitlement was melting away into a comic portrayal of bewilderment, reminding me of a cat trying to understand why someone filled its personal water bowl with juice instead. I leaned back against the car, arms crossed, loving my role in this vaudevillian farce. In that moment of panic and chaos, I spotted Marcus, hand hovering over the remote system that controlled our prized Chaos Engine Invader gadget. He was stifling laughter, and a subtle nod made it clear we were on the same wavelength. Should we just let it, marinate a bit longer? He asked, barely containing his mirth, as the SUV wheezed in what would surely become a neighborhood legend, with Karen's name etched in the annals of HOA absurdity. Oh, it's definitely going to need a hearty dose of ridicule before we pull the plug, I replied, my eyes sparkling with amusement. If laughter truly was the best medicine, then this suburban revolt was surely some sort of miracle cure. The tension in the air morphed into pure energy as the witnesses exchanged glances, each one feeding off the rising hilarity of our improvised theater. Neighbors began positioning themselves along the sidewalk, drawn in by the spectacle, their frowns from earlier completely replaced by the shared glee of schadenfreude. It was an invitation to join me on the stage of delightful revenge, and Karen was the unwilling star performer, trapped in her own farcical moment. Shall we get some popcorn or just watch the melting queen of HOA? Joe, an older gentleman from down the street, joked quietly to his wife, and the muffled safety valve of laughter erupted again. The unintentional roast was igniting new alliances among the residents, an unexpected camaraderie built around the absurdity of our collective powerlessness against the HOA tyrant. Before I could carefully orchestrate the grand finale, Karen finally managed to extract her temper from the depths of chaos and glared at me with daggers in her eyes. You think this is funny? You will pay for this. You are going to regret messing with me, Alex Rivera, she bellowed. But even her worst threats couldn't land against the waves of laughter emanating from our small audience. Does she not understand yet? I thought with amusement, if you tangle with the Rivera clan and their merry band of neighbors, you'd better pack a sense of humor, along with your threats. I took a step closer, practically buzzing with the thrill of rebellion. Oh, Karen, you really should lighten up. It's just a little friendly fun. Or do you want to file another complaint? I tossed back, relishing her growing frustration. As the SUV wheezed and sputtered like a dog choking on a sock, I could already see a change in Karen's once unbearable stature. The relentless force of laughter had unpeeled a facade that had otherwise kept her encased in an air of superiority. Just then, right as her car made an ominous final wheeze, a sound reminiscent of a bad sitcom being canceled, Marcus burst out, "Maybe she should submit an HOA request to get her engine fixed." The collective gasp and subsequent laughter from the bystanders almost sent me to the ground, and I knew at that moment that the tables had finally turned. And just like that, as the laughter echoed in the evening air, I could feel the weight of oppression lifting, replaced by a newfound alliance and camaraderie among neighbors united against the HOA's reigning tyrant. The image of Karen, storming out of her mercurial SUV like an angry bull swaddled in wool, would become an iconic piece of local lore, one in which I would gleefully play the living legend. Would our community finally rally against Karen and her HOA antics? Would my kids ride freely without the fear of their bicycles vanishing into the abyss of Karen's special projects? Either way, the battle was just revving its engines, and I felt ready for whatever absurdities awaited us next. The saga was only beginning. The sound of hushed laughter and muffled gasps became the soundtrack to our suburban show. And, oh, how the laughs echoed. It was as if I had become the town's reluctant hero, poised against the tyrannical Karen, the overbearing HOA matriarch. I reveled in the sight of her digitized debate with her sputtering SUV. It was a spectacle that could have won an Emmy for Best Comedic Performance in a non-existent HOA drama. So, armed with a sense of humor sharper than a freshly cut flannel shirt, I leaned into the hood of her vehicle, ready to deliver my next quip. "So, Karen," I called out, playing coy as her flustered expression supplied the punchline. "Do you need a minute to talk to your car? Maybe it needs some gentle coaxing." At that moment, Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. He staggered forward, clutching his abdomen as he erupted in laughter. "It's not the car that needs help. It's definitely you," he teased. And it was as if he had exploded the cosmic balloon of tension that had momentarily settled over the fiasco. The onlookers, now fully invested in this suburban soap opera, erupted in supportive giggles, transformed from a motley crew of concerned neighbors into a united front of comedy lovers. It was as if the laughter had knitted us all together in a tight community of mischief, making warriors ready to fight against the mundane shackles of HOA rules and regulations. How could one woman's SUV disaster bond us so quickly? Surely, if Karen didn't recoil in shock and horror soon, she would steal the show for good. Why was it that pettiness could unite communities? Perhaps John, the guy from down the street who had taken too many HOA meetings for his own good, couldn't help but engage in the escalating antics. He sidled closer with an air of conspiratorial camaraderie. "What's next, Karen?" he interjected, arms folded, basking in this absurd drama. "Are you going to file a complaint against your own vehicle for dereliction of duty?" And with that, my eye twitched with suppressed laughter. If she were engaged in serious matters before, there was no possibility of salvaging her dignity now, and thankfully so. Karen's careful grip on authority was beginning to slip, and I could almost sense a shift in the universe, where justice and hilarity were regaining their tenuous balance with each snicker. As the cacophony of laughter continued, it dawned on me how satisfying it was to channel the energy towards a common enemy. It was as if we were creating a supportive energy field, where we could all collectively exhale our grievances and sorrows over HOA regulations, along with our own tales of brushes with the House of Karen. I shared the stories with my neighbors, tales of when Karen admonished my daughter for leaving sidewalk chalk art in place for too long, Or when she once so boldly left a passive-aggressive note on Marcus's car for not appropriately disposing of his pizza boxes. Each recounting added fuel to the communal fire we were now stoking, and Karen was the kindling. A fitting turn of fate, indeed. But wait, the piece de resistance was yet to unfold. With renewed vigor, fueled by laughter, I glanced at my device, my unyielding anti-theft reincarnation of suburban justice, a gadget engineered by Marcus for moments like this. Shall we give it another go? I winked at Marcus, who brought his remote closer. Just at that moment, Karen turned on her heel, her fury bubbling, and for a split second, it seemed she was going to launch into another of her overblown reprimands. But the wild glint in my eyes obviously held her at bay, a dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she was outmatched in this particular contest of wills. With one deft click, Marcus activated the device again, sending a melodious beep ringing out from my well-crafted monster. The SUV jolted forward slightly, sputtering like an overwhelmed pig in mud. Karen's eyes widened, disbelief flooding her typically controlled demeanor. Amidst the onlookers, exhilaration swelled like a wave, and I almost felt like I was reaching the climax of a great film therapy session. "Oh dear, it looks like your car is about to file a complaint against you," I exclaimed, sending the people gathered into knots of laughter once more. The theatricality of the moment rippled through the crowd, solidifying their alliance and mutual delight at the spectacle before them. Meanwhile, Karen's indignation only grew stronger, making her red face resemble a ripe tomato as she scampered back to her car. The juxtaposition between authority and absurdity unwaveringly stood before us. As she wrestled with the buttons and knobs in a futile attempt to save face, the reality hit me like a freight train of amusement. This was no longer merely a skirmish over a stolen bike. It was a full-blown social commentary, wrapped in humor and an absurdity that only suburban life could supply. I exchanged gazes with Marcus, and we shared a moment of revelry amidst the chaos. Would this serve as the rallying point for neighbors tired of Karen's overreach? A hope tinged with mischief flashed across my mind. Would we really unite as comrades in rebellion against the dystopian Camden Heights HOA charter? So this is what community looks like, huh? I mused aloud, with a chuckle bolstered by our newfound bravery. The idea of claiming back our neighborhood felt exhilarating. We had the audacity for revolution and a fair share of laughs piled on top. While the onlookers continued their lively banter and Karen wrestled for control, I couldn't help but wonder what the next chapter in this absurd saga would bring. Had we reached the tipping point where Karen would realize her reign had come to a halt, or was this merely the beginning of a long battle we would have to fight together? Whichever way it swung, one thing was certain: the absurdity would continue, entangling Karen and the HOA in a delightful web of karma and hilarity. What other stories lay ahead, waiting to unfold in this suburban battlefield? As Karen's face turned a shade of crimson not seen since last summer's tomato festival, I couldn't help but relish the moment. She was desperately thrusting her hands around her SUV's steering wheel, as if issuing a diplomatic summons to an uncooperative machine. The absurdity of it all was remarkable. This woman who so generously wielded her authority was now at the mercy of an anti-theft device, and, quite frankly, a bunch of giggling onlookers. "You know, Karen," I called out, playing my own brand of sabotage with a smirk that could light up the night. "If you had just asked to borrow a bike, I think the community would have been much more accommodating." The smattering of laughter that followed had manifested into full-blown cackling. At this point in our motley revolution, it was clear that Karen had become an embodiment of her own caricature, a drama queen thwarted not by her criminal neighbor, but by the very propriety she'd worked so hard to enforce. The crowd began to take it up a notch. Samantha, our resident flower gardener and notorious gossip, broke into a chant of "Karen, Karen, Karen," feeding the hilarity that enveloped the scene. The shrill words echoed against the backdrop of perfectly manicured lawns and white picket fences, a wild cacophony of rebellion against the dull monotony of our HOA-ruled lives. Was this what unity looked like? An HOA meeting turned into entertainment worthy of Broadway? While the spotlight shifted from Karen to the rest of the neighborhood, I leaned a little closer to Marcus. I quipped, nudging him with an elbow. If we don't do something quick, she might start marketing her car as an emotional support vehicle. What would that even look like? This vehicle nurtures your inner rage, free refunds for cranky HOA members. A fresh volley of laughter erupted again, pulling even more neighbors into our mischief-laden fold. I glanced around, catching the eyes of my fellow comrades, scanning their expressions as they reveled in the absurdity. We were no longer just a group of disgruntled homeowners. We were now a team of dignified jesters, playing a role in an ongoing sketch comedy about suburban survival. And yet, as much as I wanted to soak in the atmosphere of camaraderie, I knew our fun had to come with a sense of purpose. Every laugh was another brick laid in the wall of our collective defiance. I needed to push the envelope further, to ensure that Karen felt the pressure of this cornucopia of laughter and rebellion. It was now or never. "All right, everyone," I declared, raising my arms to orchestrate our haphazard symphony. "I say we need a grand finale. How about we swarm her SUV with bikes, decorated bikes? We'll even borrow some of the kids' scariest Halloween decorations." The idea electrified the air as giggles echoed in waves, and I suspected I'd just summoned suburban chaos in its highest form. As if on cue, the neighborhood kids hopped on their bikes, glitter and streamers flying wildly about as they pelleted Karen's vehicle with what could best be described as a festive horde. Laughter, mixed with the tinkling of bike bells, creating a splendid soundtrack of rebellion. Karen, panic swirling in her bewildered gaze, seemed caught between erupting fury and sheer embarrassment. It was glorious. Yet suddenly, like a scene from a suspense thriller, the sky darkened as I glimpsed movement behind the treetops. A large bird floated closer, circling the revelers, and all eyes shifted upward. What could that be? An omen? Or just the universe reminding us that even comedic chaos must have its way? The bird, as it turned out, was just a wayward turkey vulture, perhaps scouting our joyous debacle, but it couldn't have happened at a better time. Just as the crowd gasped at its descent, Karen seemed to lose the plot entirely. Leaping out of her car, she began to flail her arms, shouting something about interference of living entities, or maybe it was just the air. It was a display fit for a miscast stage production, where her inflated sense of authority finally met the whims of neighbors, determined to snatch back their peace. Marcus, someone who clearly enjoyed impromptu theatrics as much as I did, nudged me even harder. "Dude, she's just mixing the physical and the absurd. I almost feel bad for her," he cackled, unsure if he was serious or not. Almost. I turned to him, my eyes narrowed in devilish delight. "No remorse today, my friend. We are mere spectators of fate. Besides, we're giving her a performance to remember. If only Karen could embrace some comedic relief, we might have a genuinely interesting community meeting next week." I leaned back against my bike, taking a moment to breathe in the surreal atmosphere of the moment. Who would have thought suburban life could be so outrageous? The final ingredient to this governmental oversimplification of HOA control was brewing, and rather than worry about our next moves, I chose to bask in what we had accomplished. Breaching the sacred barrier of Karen's authority had set off a beautiful chain reaction among our community, and whether she realized it or not, she was the catalyst for an uncharacteristic unity. Little did she know that the hilarity of the situation spelled less about her and more about us. A bonding experience wrapped in the absurdity of BMX-inspired Victorian rebellion. As the spirited procession continued, I couldn't help but wonder just how far we could stretch this glorious rebellion. Moments like these don't come often, after all. Was there greater wisdom to extract from Karen's embarrassment? Or was this just a stepping stone towards something even more delightful, an HOA revolution born through humor? There were countless unanswered questions fluttering around like fairy lights in the evening air. But one thing was for sure, this chaos could not go unchallenged. What other adventures awaited us in this increasingly mischievous suburban saga? It turned out that our neighborhood comrade Karen wasn't about to let go of her increasingly theatrical distress lightly. As the kids ensconced her SUV in a garish ensemble of bicycles and half-deflated inflatable ghosts that had been haphazardly scavenged from Halloween's past, her eyes widened with a mixture of fury and something miraculously resembling confusion. It was as if she'd just discovered there was a hidden chapter in the HOA handbook that she had glossed over, one that explicitly forbade spontaneous gatherings involving bicycles and juvenile spirits. Amidst the dreamy chaos, laughter filled the air, as did an unmistakable air of unity that reminded me of summer block parties when we were kids. Who needs bouncy houses? I thought to myself, when you have a rogue HOA member in crisis. Marcus, ever the gadgeteer, grabbed his phone and began recording. "You know, Alex," he chuckled, while aiming the camera towards the unraveling scene of joyful descent. "In a way, she's giving us exactly what we need for our next neighborhood watch meeting. Who needs normal complaints when you have an HOA horror story on a live stream?" The hilarity of the situation dawned fully on us. Karen had effectively morphed from a fearsome enforcer of petty rulemaking into the unwitting star of our community's circus. My neighbors rallied behind her vehicle, transforming the scene into a vibrant festival of camaraderie, even breaking into an improvised rendition of "We Will Rock You," which somehow sounded even more amplified amidst shrieks of laughter. Then came a snap of genius that would put this already absurd escapade into overdrive. Out from a nearby lawn emerged Mr. Thompson, the local weatherman with a penchant for melodrama and very loud Hawaiian shirts, a sight to behold, really. He approached, unashamedly brandishing a dessert cart filled with ice cream sandwiches, neatly stacked like edible trophies. "Hey, folks, who's up for some ice cream to celebrate our HOA liberation?" he shouted, presenting his sugary offerings while standing atop a park bench like an incredulous ringleader. The absurd juxtaposition left Karen floundering in the vast ocean of mockery and, now, spontaneously flavored happiness. What could she do? Yell about trespassing pastry purveyors? As the sugary revolution unfolded, my kids quickly confiscated a couple of sandwiches, standing by me like proud liability insurance underwriters. "Dad, this is the coolest day ever," shouted my son Tommy while munching his ice cream wildly. I glanced over at Marcus, who was now mimicking an obnoxiously posh waiter taking orders for ice cream. "Would you like that with a sprinkle of defiance or a scoop of sweet satisfaction?" he jested, sending a ripple of giggles around us. It was in this brief instant I realized that, despite the uproar, what we were really building here was something more permanent than just an amusing retort to Karen's tyranny. We were forging a new bond, one that tasted sweet, and far more engaging than anything HOA approved. Amidst the playful chaos, Karen's automotive misfortune had sparked more than just a laugh. It began to illuminate the unpredictably vibrant lives of the neighbors around us. Who knew that a tyrannical HOA enforcer could trigger the great ice cream uprise of 23? Suddenly, the specter of precise lawn edges and rigid regulations faded into the background, and in its place emerged a collective spirit of joyful resistance, forged in the absurdity of our new reality. It struck me then, our neighborhood had been waiting for that catalyst, a figurehead to rally against the HOA's overreach. And here, in this warm embrace of ice cream-clad laughs and bike-bedecked SUVs, we became the underdog dream team. Just as I savored this poetic irony, Karen started to backtrack, realizing she'd become less of an authoritarian figure and more of a ludicrous punchline. Perhaps spurred on by the slights and jeering chants, she marched back towards her SUV, arms crossed, desperately trying to project an air of authority, while slipping clumsily on some rainbow sprinkles that popped beneath her extravagant heels. The laughter intensified. She fumbled with her phone, her fingers hastily appeasing the HOA board over a state of emergency. "Yes, fellow board members, I need you to listen. This lack of HOA compliance is going too far," she stammered through clenched teeth. In contrast, the laughter erupted from our impromptu neighborhood rally, her desperate statements sounding less like rebuke and more like the cliffhanging act of a comedy series spiraling to its penultimate season finale. As she stood there, flustered and on the receiving end of joyous mockery, I felt a surge of power within. This raucous display of rebellion, not just against Karen but against her perceived entitlement, was more exhilarating than any DIY project I had tackled in my living room. Armed with the victory of community spirit, I stepped forward, feeling almost a warmth from the crowd's resounding support. "Hey, Karen, who knew that being a good neighbor meant being the punchline of our best party?" This time, it was my cheer that fueled the laughter as the absurd antics reached a crescendo. "Next time you borrow a bike, bring your own sprinkles." With that, the laughter boiled over, transforming into a euphoric rallying cry for our neighborhood. In the end, Karen may have been dragged into our web of amusing chaos and helplessly stripped of her brooding power, yet out of every laugh and ice-crammed moment emerged a greater understanding. That community was about picking each other up, whether it came from lifting a bike over a dispute or throwing an impromptu ice cream party on a confused tyrant's car. When our neighborhood's board met next Saturday, a new sense of unity would echo in our hearts and in the collective mindset of the HOA. We might not have unseated Karen altogether, but we certainly sparked a protest that was sure to stick in the HOA's memory like sprinkles in the carpet of a freshly soiled SUV. What more mischief would our newly united front inspire next?